Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Positive Psychology Hour, a series in partnership with the Whole Being Institute and the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness. Today, we are going to be discussing You Deserve the Space You Take Up in This World, moving beyond inferiority through self-compassion with Erin, Crosby. During this interactive presentation, Erin will review the components of self-compassion and how to apply this skill to overcome feelings of insecurity and inferiority. As we move into the fall and many of us return to the full workplace full time, it's important that we bring our self-esteem with us. Erin's going to be presenting this material in hope that it might ease the process of stepping back into the world after many months spent in the quiet safety of our own homes. We can reignite the feelings of anxiety and worry about the role we play when we step outside that safe boundary. Self-compassion can ease that adjustment, reminding us of our worth and that having fears or perceived limitations right now is so very normal and incredibly common. Just so you know a little bit about Erin before I introduce you to her and you get to meet her, she's a licensed clinical social worker who resides in Northern Virginia, where she's building a private practice focused on helping women of all ages regain and develop their confidence and feel empowered in their lives. She contributed a chapter with the same title as this program to the upcoming book, Finding Unshakable Happiness. And Erin has worked with clients in inpatient and outpatient mental health settings for a long time. She holds master's degrees in psychology research from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland and social work from the University of Pennsylvania. She completed her SIP Positive Psychology training with the Whole Being Institute in 2017. I welcome to the call, Erin. I'm going to spotlight you and ask you, gosh, how did you get interested in positive psychology and even find out about SIP, the Certificate in Positive Psychology?
Oh my goodness, I was so lucky. I had been for social work, we have to do continuing education credits, and I had done one in was on compassion and wisdom, randomly enough, and that program got me on a listserv of some sort, and I got this email one day from the Whole Being Institute and about this was when it was a whole year long, and you had a whole week in person at the beginning and a whole week, in person at the end. And it changed everything. And so I found a way to make it happen. And, it was the best thing that ever happened. So I'll talk about it all day long.
Yeah, it's funny. We just started the new SIP cohort, just started. So some of the listeners on the call are actually in that positive psychology certificate program. It's a 9-month program. And if there are those of you that would like to join, we can't encourage you enough to do that. So today's topic it seems like it's very personal to you, this idea of insecurity and developing self-confidence and using self-compassion. Is there a reason why this topic is so meaningful to you?
So I'm going to tell you all about it. This was the focus of my project with SIP. I wrote this chapter as part of Donna's book, who you'll talk with next week, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I saw, topics with inferiority were one of the things that she had wanted kind of covered, right? And so it kind of spoke to me, and I felt like it really was taking sort of my project that I did through SIP with self-compassion and empowerment, and sort of moving that into kind of the realities of everyday world, right? Where, you start off, you leave that program, right? And you're so built up and you have all of these skills, and then kind of you get back into the nitty gritty, right? of the day and the world. And, you know, and COVID happened, and, you know, it's hard to keep up these things. So, you know, for today, I really wanted to talk about, you know, the basics of self-compassion, and it is the basics, you know, and is really the primary tool that I use for myself to combat inferiority, because it's like, you know, constant a lot of the times.
Yeah, it can be, and especially if one has humility in their top strengths, you know, and I imagine that it's up there for you because you're quite accomplished. And we're so delighted to have you here to talk to us about this. This is an area of expertise for you. So I think we should just get started. I know Phoebe's going to run your PowerPoint. So thank you for sharing with us this amazing and important topic.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Phoebe, for asking me to do this. You'll know I'm incredibly nervous. I do very well one-on-one with people. I get in a group and I tend to get a little nervous. So I use my sort of self-compassionate, you can't really see my chest right now, but I kind of put my hands here, which I definitely encourage everyone to do if they are feeling stressed at all, you know, by any of the things I talk about. Go for it. You know, I'm just really happy to be here. So I'm gonna try to slow down. Sometimes I talk really fast when I get really nervous, so I'm gonna try to be mindful of that and slow down. But if you need me to repeat anything, or you know, have questions, I'm not the best at looking at the chat. I'm not the best at, you know, multitasker, but I'll do my best.
I'm going to be here for you. I'm right here to help you.
Okay. So again, like I said, you know, I want to talk about, you know, the basics of self-compassion as a tool that has been so important in my life, you know, in combating this sense of inferiority and this negative self-talk. And, you know, but again, it's truly the basics. I really encourage you. I'll make sure you all get a list of resources that I put together of Kristen Neff's, you know, the big researcher, her website and her book, her books, and then Christopher Germer, his website, he's another one, and his books. So, so you have all that information, and you know, you could read for days and days through all their information. So, you know, I'd love to do that. I'm gonna tell you first a little bit about why I talk about this and why this is something I like to talk about and help people with. And then honestly, at the end, I would really love to have a conversation and hear, you know, about what your all's experience is, and, you know, how, what thoughts come to mind when you hear some of the things I have to say. So, so here we go. Let's give it a go. You can switch to the next. Oh, and by the way, my email is right there. If anyone had other questions or wanted to talk to me at all, feel free to reach out. You always can. There you go. I can put it in the chat at the end too. Okay, so why am I here? So I'm a social worker, right? I came out of school ready, well, wanting to change the world when I went in, and then having tools that made me sort of feel like I could do that when I left. You know, I wanted to help everyone and everything. However, I kind of, way I would describe myself is probably an excessive people pleaser. It's something I have struggled with always. I dealt with pretty severe bullying most every single day of my childhood and into my teens. And I don't know, I just turned into this person, right, who, you know, kind of could never stop helping people. I could never do enough. You know, it was always more. And, you know, all of that combined with, you know, zero boundaries that I had developed, right? I had this, you know, people-pleasing tendency, this low self-worth, and like no ability to set any limits. It kind of led to like this perfect recipe of burnout. You know, I was just exhausted. I was exhausted in every area of my life, but especially my work. Um, you know, I found myself, I was working in pretty high intensity, high stress jobs. And honestly, like within probably, I finished grad school in 2010. By early 2012, I was like online Googling, like, what else can I do with an MSW? You know, there's got to be something else I can do with an MSW that would involve me sitting in a quiet room by myself, not having to help solve people's problems. It was just, I was overwhelmed. I was very exhausted. Um, so I alluded to it earlier, but you know, it's a long story about sort of how I found my way to SIP. But it was through that I really discovered self-compassion as a tool. Um, and I immediately connected to the idea. You know, I think so much of what had gotten me to this place of burnout was just all the negative self-talk, right? You know, I had developed over the years. Um, and I never felt good enough. I never felt smart enough. Um, I never felt like I deserved to be wherever I was. Um, you know, going to some of the schools that I went to, I was surrounded by very intelligent people, and I just always felt like an imposter, you know, like, how did they make this mistake? How did they get in here? You know what I mean? Um, and so using this, so something about this idea of actually the opposite, right? The opposite of being cruel and telling I didn't belong or wasn't smart enough was this whole idea of self-compassion. And I think that's probably one of the reasons it just kind of like, the second I heard about it in the program, it just stuck. I couldn't shake it, which was a good thing. Um, you know, and so through the course of the program and using these tools, you know, it really led me to kind of create a shift, you know, and I found a sort of new, less stressful job. Um, you know, I started to sort of plan out what I wanted to be doing with the rest of my life and, you know, with my degree and what I had trained for. And I figured, you know, sitting in a quiet room by myself, not helping people probably was not it. I could start to see that. Um, but so kind of fast forward a little bit, and the one thing that really began to come to my mind um, was that I really, you know, when talking with people about this whole experience, was really that I never wanted to sound like perfect at getting better. You know what I mean? I think, you know, I had a lot of healthy changes that happened. I accomplished some things that I never thought I would do. Um, you know, I was in a different job, you know, and I had an idea of what I was working towards, but I want to be completely honest. And I think that um, it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of energy to sustain, you know, some of these practices, you know, self-compassion included. And I think, you know, my negative self-talk kind of rears its head when I'm uncomfortable or I feel like I don't belong in like new situations. And I had started this new job in the school system. You know, I didn't know anybody. Our role, we go among different schools, so I never really was part of the community anywhere, which for me is like a huge thing. If I feel like nobody wants me there, I then take it onto another level, right? You know, I don't belong here. Nobody wants me here. There's other people that are better. You know, I could go on and on, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that um, I had to sort of find a way, you know, to get back to these practices that had really been a lifesaver for me. Self-compassion being the most important one of those. And so it was funny because in the middle of sort of trying to figure this out, in the middle of this, things had gotten, you know, difficult. We had been through COVID, and this was late last year, January time. That's when this opportunity came out about to write this chapter in Donna's book. that you'll hear more about next week. And I was really interested, you know, when I first saw the email, you know, but honestly, I felt like a fraud, an absolute fraud. And you know, I was really struggling at the time. And, you know, my first reaction was, I can't do this. You know, no one's going to care what I have to say. I don't belong in a room, in a book full of writers. You know, I've never written anything really of much length in my life. You name it, he was critical. I was telling it to myself. Then all of a sudden, this voice, this old little friend, I kind of like to think about it as, started, and it said, well, you know, why not you? Like, why couldn't you do this? And I was able to sort of take a minute, take a deep breath. And I thought, well, okay, well, maybe, right? You know, the fact that feeling like I haven't been a perfect student of positive psychology, you know, on a daily basis since finishing my SIP year, you know, maybe it makes me sort of all the more relatable to, you know, people, and then people who have never sort of heard of this topic or anything like that before. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. And I wrote back, and I did the whole process, and kind of here I am now, you know. And the whole writing process itself helped pull me back into remembering why this tool is so important. And, you know, I think what I wanted to make sure that I shared is that I really believe that healing ebbs and flows, right? You know, and for me, I believe that the more rigid I am with, you know, being better or healing, the worse I do. And so, but what I do know is that with practicing self-compassion, you know, as best I can, you know, from day to day, is really helps me maintain sort of like upward movement, right? There's dips, but things are moving up, even if there's dips, right? And it helps me remember that. And so that's the whole piece of it. That's the most important to me. So if you want to move on to the next one, maybe. Now we'll talk about what it actually is. In case, I know you guys have had some talks on self-compassion, but I want to just kind of, again, go through the basics and then have a conversation. So what is self-compassion? I put this, Kristen Neff on her website lists this out, right? I won't read anything. I know it's no fun when people read from slides, so I'll try not to do that. But, you know, essentially, right, self-compassion is treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would treat a friend, right, who is also struggling. You know, if you remember absolutely nothing else, remember that. That's the most important thing. You know, you're acting in the same sort of way towards yourself, right? That you know, when you're having a difficult time, when you fail, when you notice something you don't like about yourself, maybe, you know, like that support you would give a friend, right? There's no like stiff upper lip. It's acknowledgement, right? So this is a practice you guys can all do, right? This is so difficult for me right now. You know, what do I need to comfort myself in this moment, right? And you take some deep breaths. It can be as simple as that. I probably need to take a deep breath right now. I think I'm talking fast. You know, and just that acknowledgement that something is difficult and that you're struggling, right? You know, we all want to make changes, right? And create a healthier and happier life for ourselves. And I think with self-compassion, I think what our motivation is for making these changes is because you care about yourself enough to make those changes, right? Not because you feel unacceptable or worthless, right? How you are. So it's a shift in where that motivation comes from, right? It's like, oh, I do deserve to take a break. I do deserve to talk to a friend. Like, I need a minute. I need some time to get myself together, right? And that's okay. It's not a weakness. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say for that. So
We had just a quick question,
oh,
Erin.
sorry, I missed it. What is it?
No. Well, it's from me, so it
Oh,
wasn't in the chat.
okay.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your authenticity and your brilliance at just being human. It's just palatable and beautiful. I was wondering if you could explain for us mindfulness versus over-identification. What do you mean by over-identification? I think I just wanted some clarity on that one.
So, thank you. So I'll explain mindfulness. So when Kristen Neff, she has her book and all her research, right? It's all based off of these three components, right? So I just talked a bit about self-kindness, right? And so mindfulness, the over-identification piece, is really about, so mindfulness or self-compassion is really all about balance, right? So with mindfulness, right, that's going to help us make sure that our feelings aren't suppressed, right, and they're not or exaggerated, right, and blown out of proportion. So which is where sort of that we can get stuck, right, and over identified with how maybe negative things are, or how, like, later on I'm going to talk a little bit about the misconception that self-compassion enables self-pity, right? I would argue that self-pity is really an over-identification of emotion, right? So the way mindfulness combats that, does that make sense?
Yes, and so in other words, being in the present moment versus sort of believing that other reality.
Yes.
Is what,
exactly.
Whether it's, when we get into that self-critical place that we over-identify and think that we are that.
Yes, 100%, no arguments, this is who I am, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
You get stuck and rigid, right? Whereas with mindfulness, it's the opposite of that, right? It's hard to be rigid and over-identified, or
right.
You know what I'm saying? It's hard to be rigid and mindful of the experience you're having without judgment, right?
It sort of reminds me of
a
fixed mindset.
Thanks, Christine.
Sure. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset, right? In a way.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's all, so developing this tool of mindfulness allows you to be non-judgmental, right, about your feelings. You're more receptive that you have them. You have a spectrum of emotion. We're kind of able to observe them the way they are, right? And then not try to suppress them, because with suppression of emotion kind of comes shame, right? You can throw that in here too. I have to suppress these emotions because I can't acknowledge that they exist, because I probably feel ashamed of them, right? So one of the things that Kristen Neff says that I read is that it's not possible to ignore our pain. I want to say it how she said it. It's not possible to ignore our pain and feel compassion for it at the same time, right? So this is why mindfulness is key. It's very hard to say you don't have these emotions, right? Or they don't matter, but also then say you're being compassionate towards yourself, right? They don't exist together. And the one offsets the other. So I thought that was really important. I think that's to heal, right? You need to acknowledge those emotions. And so this
You
is
have
a way
to feel to
that
heal.
happen. Huh?
You have to feel to heal.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Beautiful.
And then the third piece that, there you go, friend in your back pocket. Exactly right. To view my thoughts. Yep, exactly. Good. Oh, good. I'm so glad you practiced this. That's good. So,
and Cheryl says,
note.
Cheryl says, mindfulness helps me get a meta view of my thoughts,
Yep.
which enables me to see the story I'm telling myself versus this is who I truly am. So it sounds to me like what you're saying here is that we're able to say, I'm not my thoughts. Mm-hmm. I am more than that.
I'm bigger than that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And my thoughts are okay too, and just lastly, the third piece is this idea of common humanity, right? Which is the idea that we're all in this together. We're not alone in our negative self-talk. We're not, alone in feelings of shame or intense judgment. Suffering is a common human experience, right? And so we suffer, we make mistakes, that is a part of being alive, right? And being a human. And so to get stuck in this sense of why are these things happening to me, right? When I was at the worst, I had this job. I worked in a hospital and I was a social worker on the trauma unit. And I will tell you, it was extremely depressing. And I was miserable and I commuted. If anyone lives around here who's online, or most of you are probably in New York, but I commuted from about what should have been about 30 minutes into DC. It usually would take me 2 hours. I mean, you guys have traffic up there, probably worse than here, but it was paired with a very intense, high need job. It was rough. So I was in a pretty terrible place. I mean, I hated the work. It was not anything like what I wanted to study. I was miserable, and I had convinced myself that most people hate their jobs, but I really hate the job, and I had it sort of shut me off from everybody around me because people didn't want to hear about it, really. Not all the time, no one wants to hear every single time they see you how much you hate your job, and so it cuts you off from that connection to other people. And I had always, I struggled with this idea that people are in the same boat. And I remember I was not at that job anymore, but a different one when I started SIP. But I was still driving quite a long ways to the office. And I remember trying to practice this, and I'd be sitting in my car in the traffic, fuming, and being like, why am I in this mess? And I would pause. I remember that enough. And I would practice, these different skills. And I remember thinking, I would look at the people in the cars around me. And I'm like, Erin, you are not alone in this. You are in a sea of other people stuck in this traffic, all just trying to get home from work. Everybody wants to just get home to their family, and live their life. And so I remember that very clearly. And so this idea really helped me kind of pull myself out of that. It was a little bit of a pity party. I mean, I won't lie, we all need those sometimes, there's no judgment in it at all. But this can help kind of pull me out of that piece, so those are kind of the three pieces. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, how are we on time? I don't know what time it is. Sorry, I'm a talker. I'll just do this very quickly. About what self-compassion is not, because I think sometimes people, even in our own minds, will say, you know, yeah, but that's a pity party, you're dwelling in that, or how can you, spend that much time thinking about yourself? That's narcissistic, or, these kinds of things. And so Kristen Neff has, of course, gone through and taken these really step by step and talked about why they're different and why self-compassion is so important, despite of what people might think it may be. So, so just briefly, I mean, self-esteem, right, is very different from self-compassion. It's all about, like, what is our value as an individual, our self-worth, like those positive feelings that we have about ourselves, right? If you have low self-esteem, you're off, research shows you're often depressed, are very anxious, have a lack of motivation, all kinds of stuff. But the issue then, trying to raise your self-esteem can be tricky, because oftentimes it's disconnected from other people, right? It's about you. And so it's about, how do I stand out from the crowd, right? How am I? It sort of implies average isn't okay, I need to be better than this person next to me to make myself feel better about myself, right? It makes it external, right? That ability to build yourself up depends on other people and what other people do, and how you compare yourself to those people, right? And rather than internally, or, with self-compassion, you can, what am I trying to say? I just lost my train of thought. It's about, you're worthy innately, right? You're worthy and deserve compassion, not based on a set of skills that you have, or, traits you were born with, right? You as a human are worthy of compassion because you are human, right? And that is something you have all the time. So I'm not gonna, I had a whole thing listed out. I don't need to say all that. Anyway, but I think that's really the moral of the story, though. And that's the big difference, right? Is that, not that, having self-esteem is bad. I don't mean to imply that either. But when you're focusing on, I think using self-compassion as a tool to then build your self-esteem is the healthier way to go, rather than seeking out external, comments, or, rewards or accolades or whatnot. So when it comes to self-pity, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it reminds me of when I was a kid, my father used to quote from the poem, I don't know if you know it, the Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars, and you have a right to be here. It's and that sort of reminds me of what you're talking about, which is that permission to be human, of course, from Tal Ben-Shahar, and also this beautiful example of that we are part of the universe, right? We are, just by being human, we have the right to life, to vitality, to be here. And that's very different than self-esteem, as you were saying, which is, as you said, compares us to someone else. And I'm just struck by your kindness and the way that you are approaching this, and it's really, really beautiful, and such a contrast to self-pity, or, as you said, getting into that mind space where we get to be self-indulgent, or really self-focused, and over-identifying with those negative thoughts, versus that expansion and saying, wait a minute, I'm not alone. I can identify with, like, I'm part of the stars. I'm made of the same thing as stardust, right? And that's.
Can you maybe even type in the chat the name of that poem? Because I'd love to. That would be a great one to print off.
Yeah, for sure, we can do that.
Because I think that's sort of, I think that's one of the reasons too, that this whole concept has changed so much for me personally. I think the idea, thank you, Phoebe. yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can take these sort of, idea of self-esteem and this and self-compassion, allowing for, internal worth, right? And connect that again to the world, right? The stars, that we are a part of a whole community of people, right? Beings. My dog's down in the basement because she would start barking. Um, but that are all worthy just by being here, and I think that it's hard to argue with, for someone who has a very critical mind. It's hard to argue with that, right? And I'm like, you can take that and be like, you know what? Maybe I'm not right about this. Maybe okay, I'm going to take it from the universe, and go with it and try to have some thanks, Phoebe. At least pretend like I believe these things, and then you eventually do, right? You catch on. And I'm not going to go into all this detail because I do want to have a conversation with everyone, but
Erin, I just wanted to also say to you that my understanding from the work that I've done in neurology with the brain and thinking is that some of the most brilliant thinkers are also the most critical of themselves. So I would argue that your ability to be critical actually is an example or proof that you're quite brilliant. And that the left brain, my brain mentor used to say, Elaine D. Bouilleport, has the power to destroy anything, right? That critical side of us. And then when we go into sort of, as Jill Bolte Taylor from My Stroke of Insight talks about, this circuitry of the right brain, or now we know more of the whole brain, as Dr. Sherry Kelly talks about, this expansiveness, and in positive psychology, once again, going into that growth mindset. But really, to be able to take ourselves out like that with self-criticism sometimes can be because we have this brilliant mind that can see so many different things, right? And it's getting it in check and bringing it into kind of balance so that we can see the whole, which it sounds like you've done so beautifully with self-compassion. And to be someone who has seen such darkness and then has been able to lift themselves up using the upward spiral from Barbara Fredrickson's work of really just gratitude and appreciation and compassion and recognition, and then turning to those positive emotions like your loving kindness, is really inspirational.
Oh, that's so sweet. I hope so. I mean, that's why I'm here. As anxious as I am, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, what an incredible story. And I love that you're able to look at it and say, gosh, this kind of thinking is really self-indulgent or even selfish, and it can demotivating or weaken my core, right? And this idea that we need to protect our core, that my father used to say, we all have light and it's our job to keep it lit.
What an amazing dad you have.
Yeah.
Wow. That and I mean, that's amazing too, because I think a lot of times people grow up, what's that, like, what is that horrible phrase that people use? Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I hate that phrase. Right. This kind of idea, and like, you have to try harder, you got to push harder, more, right? Until people are beaten down and exhausted, right? And I think there's Kristen Neff's done research on motivation and self-compassion, and what is more motivating to a person, these types of words, these compassionate words, or you're terrible, try again, like this, in like sports teams, or in some kind of any kind of instruments or whatever, or school, who knows. It's
well,
much
I know
more
you work
motivating.
You work with kids, right? And it's so important. It's so important that they have this message that competition right, isn't necessarily the way to boost productivity. As my
Yes,
understanding is, Kristen's Neff's work has a whole section on, okay, there's this fear that if I'm self-compassionate, then I am not going to be able to, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to sit there and
exactly.
feel good about myself and do nothing and not amount to anything. When what I hear you saying, it's actually the negativity that can keep us in a downward spiral and keep us paralyzed and almost into that sort of that procrastinating or rigidity that even prevents us from reaching out and trying to do things. Whereas when I add self-compassion and kindness to the mix, like you say, why not me?
Hmm.
Right? Why not
Right?
me? We open up to possibility.
Yeah.
So I know you have some exercises that you wanted to talk to us about too, right?
Yes. So, so let's talk about those. So, and again, these are all on her website. They're all listed there. She has it. She has them all listed out where you can click on each one and read them. There's also a whole list of audio files with their like meditations or her talking through some of these things that are so valuable. Um, and so helpful, especially if this is new to you and you're just sort of trying to understand it or and implement it. But honestly, I mean, it can be as simple as like literally sitting here and putting your hand on your heart, you know, and taking a deep breath, you know, and saying, "I'm okay. I can do this," you know, if that's what it is that you need at that moment in time, you know. So it doesn't have to, you know, if you're not somebody, I know for me, I'm I am like a perfectionist. I said that earlier. I think, oh, people pleaser. I'm also a perfectionist. So, so, you know, for me, I'm like, I like to do things. If I'm learning something new, I like to do it the right way and how am I do it perfectly. And so this was a good lesson in sort of being like, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be you're in your car and you're incredibly stressed out and you just need to take a deep breath and tell yourself it's okay. Like it can be that, right? It doesn't have to be, I have to sit down with my notebook and write out all these different things. It doesn't have to be that, you know, it can if that's what you want. And when you have more time, I do that, you know, when I have more time, I'll sit down and do those things. But for me, it's those in the moment types of things that have sort of the most impact. You know, this idea, right, of how do you treat a friend, you know, this I think I can't remember if this one she talks through or not, but it's just sort of you can sit down with your own journal and explore that. Like think of a situation that just happened, you know, how what would I actually say to my friend? And then let yourself think through, well, why wouldn't I say those things to myself? Right? And then ask yourself again, well, why not? You know? Um, and just let yourself think about it, right? There's no harm in thinking about it, even if it's something you don't feel like you can put into practice, right? Like just give it a chance, right? And think about it. And think why not. The self-compassion break is a great one. That's definitely an audio file she has where it kind of she walks you through the three components of self-compassion, and you're definitely putting your hand on your heart for sure and breathing. And it walks you through kind of yourself and then the bigger world around us, right? And that one's only like 5 minutes. They're all pretty short.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
this one, when she's doing it through writing, is really about um, um, oh, thanks, Phoebe. She sent the link, it's in there. Um, this is about writing a letter to yourself, um, you know, from a place of acceptance and compassion. You know, you can think of a time, or it can be just more general things that maybe you need to hear and yet that you haven't heard for a long time, you know. Supportive touch is all about activating your parasympathetic nervous system. I think we do that? Oh my gosh, these are running together, but I think we did that in SIP where you could you actually Tal talked about this and you give yourself a hug, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you're actually getting a hug from someone else.
Yeah, it's
I forced
beautiful.
my
We can
dog
all
to give
do
me
that right
hugs.
now, everybody. Just grab your, you
Just
know,
do this.
your upper arms, right? Sometimes it can be, touching your face, your cheeks, and I love that touch is so much a part of self-compassion. It reminds me of Tara Brock's work where she has the acronym RAIN, where you recognize you're feeling something, right?
Yep.
You acknowledge it, then you investigate it, what's going on, and then you nurture, and you can nurture at any time. And Erin, you're such a good example that this whole talk today of taking time to nurture yourself, taking time to say, wait a minute, let me check in with myself right now, which is great to see that. Self-compassion journal, you were saying too?
Again, more, this one she'll sort of she talks about how do you incorporate these, like the 3 different components into your everyday life, right? Thinking that through, thinking about what you really want, that can be it can be scary. It can also be a motivator to write things down. What would this look like? You can then keep it, put it away for a while if you're overwhelmed, get it back out and be like, okay, well, first thing, and what are the steps that would involve this? You know what I mean? What do I need to make this first little part happen? Something, breaking those things down and but then bringing in all the other stuff, right? Maybe you're kind of like this when you're thinking it through and writing stuff down, or doing, holding your arms while you're writing stuff down. Anything you can do to get those, get that parasympathetic nervous system working its magic, to help you through this process, because it's hard.
I'm also struck by your bravery, and that all of these things require bravery. They require taking a moment and saying, wait a second, I'm going to be brave enough and courageous enough to take a second look. And also, when you were talking about, I was really struck when you were talking about how, like, you were in your driving and you were like, I don't want this. Like, recognizing what you don't want is really important. And then it's kind of scary because we know that change is afoot, right? Oh my goodness, this is safe right now. It may not be what I want, but I know it. And so it's a really huge act of bravery to say, I'm going to recognize that this is not what I want. I'm going to nurture myself and I'm going to make a change, right?
Which is terrifying, right? It's terrifying. Oh my God. But I think too, there's no, even if, and I always say this to people when I talk to them too, if they're struggling with this, because I think a lot of people are even afraid to think that things can be different, right? And I know I was, I was like, I can't even think about one day because this is my reality right now. And I don't even know where to begin in making it any different. And if you can start having some compassion just for that, right? The fact that it is terrifying to think about. It might be sad. It might make you sad to think about the fact that, you're not where you want to be, right? I mean, that's so normal, and so I think there's nothing wrong with being afraid, right? And there's nothing wrong with not acting if you're not ready either, and there's nothing wrong with being brave and going for it, I mean, I think it's all, you can tell I try really hard to not judge stuff because I think that's dangerous. That's where the negativity comes in. So, I got through all the learning stuff. I mean, I honestly would love to hear what people had to say about their own experiences. If y'all want to
do that, we can do that now, and
okay. And I'll make sure you guys get a list of all these resources.
Yeah, so let's
go
take it to the chat and see if we have any comments. And I just wonder if, everyone out there, I know that, as you said, this is a universal struggle. Anytime we come up against a challenge, we're going to knock up against our self-esteem, our self-criticism, our am I good enough? So anytime we do that, and you're talking about going back into the workforce, right? So for some people, or even just bravely going outside, can be a big challenge, especially right now as the Delta variant is around. So really bravery, courage, self-compassion, going slow. And I know as an LCSW LCSW, right? You must run into this as well, this permission to feel. I know I've talked to quite a few young people and they're like, I can't feel. It's almost as if feeling, they're afraid if they feel too intensely, they might perish. So just taking a moment and having self-compassion and allowing ourselves to feel, as Maria Serrois says, whatever it is that we're feeling, permission to be human, permission to feel, permission to, and then Dan Tomasulo talks about hope and how important that is. For me, hope is the bridge between fear and love, right? It gets us into that action state of what can I do at this moment? Oh, I can sit with this. I can sit with myself. I can be there for myself. And I just wanted to let you know, Erin, you're in good company with that perfectionist tendency. I raise my hand. Anybody else? Right? Who wants to be perfect, who wants to do well. I think, if you're anyone, if I call it P squared, perfectionist, procrastinating, wanting it to do well and all that. So I'm with you on that one for sure. And one of the, and how I do it exactly the way you're recommending. I recognize, acknowledge, I investigate, I nurture, I take a moment, I say, good for you. I have my cheerleading side. I call it, I have that sort of negative part, but then I have on my opposite as the antidote, my cheerleading side, and I say equal time. I say, okay, for every negative thought, I have to have at least a positive thought. Right?
There you go. That's a great idea.
I call, okay, yeah, you can have the pity party, but now equal time. And I found it was kind of like the practice. I don't know if you're familiar with it or if you remember from SIP, where we would write one good thing at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of that, a similar practice on that I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have this negative thought, then I have to have a positive thought. And I look at it as the scales being balanced. And not because I have to control that, but as you said, it's dangerous to go into that self-critical spiral. And if I find that if I'm having a pity party, I'll write all that stuff down. I'll actually throw it in a bowl, put it in the sink, because I always like to have, and I'll light it on fire and I'll burn all that stuff up. And then I'll say, okay, now I've done that. I've had my pity party. And what else is true? What else is true? The power of the and. What else is true? Yes, that might be true, right? I may never have written a chapter in a book before. And I've had this experience. I might be with other authors. And I really want to do this, right? Yeah, and I have a friggin' degree from the University of Pennsylvania. So, I'm a smart cookie.
I can do this.
I can do this, right? So, yes, Patricia's saying perfectionist thwarts creativity. That's what I tell myself to stop it. That's what I'm going to say is a great tagline. Sometimes if I just have a little, like a saying that gets me out of that negative thought, like what's my tagline? Who am I being in this moment? As Viktor Frankl said, I can control what? The pause in between stimulus and response. There is a pause and I have a choice and I can choose to be on my team or not on my team, right? Is what I hear you saying. And in between that moment, I can choose self-compassion. Right.
And if you got to be on a team, I mean, why not be on your own team? You know what I
mean? Right.
I mean, my goodness, you're not going to get anywhere if you're fighting against yourself,
right.
Which is what, negative self-talk. I mean, that's what that is. It developed for a purpose, right? But when you realize that you don't need it anymore.
Right. It's there to keep us safe. Right. It's because, let's face it, the whole brain is designed for security. and
What's
safety.
alive?
Keep us alive, exactly. And so if we're talking about, wait, I'm dissatisfied, I'm not happy, et cetera, then that means I'm going to do something about it, which means change, which means lack of stability. So we're kind
Danger.
of conditioned to be negative, to keep ourselves in the same situation. And what I hear you saying is that, oh, wait a second, if we have that salve of self-compassion, we can open up our vision, right, into the growth mindset and say, what else is possible? And then we need to reassure ourselves and say, it's okay, we're going to be safe. And we haven't you talked about it a little bit about the parasympathetic nervous system versus the sympathetic nervous system. What we're essentially doing is going from fight or flight, right, in that negativity, to rest and digest so I can see the options. And what a beautiful option that you wrote this freaking chapter. Can we just celebrate that?
Thank you.
And yeah, I see Rachel clapping, and I know that
Thank
next
you.
Thursday, Donna Miller is going to be here on Finding Unshakable Happiness, and she's going to be talking about that. And we'll
She's amazing.
distribute the link on Friday when we send the recording. We're going to send you a PowerPoint. This has been such a beautiful hour about how we can dive deep into the dark, into the abyss with someone who's been there and come out. A hero's journey, for sure.
I hope it was helpful. I'm so glad I
Yes.
got to be here and see you all.
Well,
Really, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and as Rachel said, thanks for today, Erin, and for being such a good role model. Yeah, it's like, if Erin can stand up here, you guys, and do this and be terrified and write a chapter and activate her strength of kindness and bravery and wanting to
About
help.
11:15
right?
this morning, I wasn't so sure.
Well, you did it, and I hope that you felt held, and I hope that this is a supportive community, and I hope that you felt like,
thank you.
yeah, because we're all in this together. Really, honestly, we started this positive psychology hour, and as a way to reach out and hold each other and walk alongside each other through this unknown. And one of the greatest things that we can be is agile, right? Which means that we gotta be able to change and change and change. And self-compassion is an important tool in the toolbox for that. So thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for giving such a great example of that. Thank you for being alive and doing all the work that you do with kids. And I can't wait to read your chapter in the book.
Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to talk more always.
Yeah, Erin's email is in the chat. It's Erin Crosby, lcsw@gmail.com. She's available. Anita says, appreciate your authenticity. Thanks very much. It was lovely. She is great, says Donna. Erin's chapter is in the book, and we'll talk more about that. Cheryl says, thanks, Erin. And
thank you,
Rachel, again, thanks. Yes. Thank you again.
Good. Thank you, Amy. That's so sweet.
Yeah, I'm gonna take off the spotlights. I'm gonna let you guys unmute yourselves and say hello. I know that we are going into the Yom Kippur holidays this week for some of you. Easy fast, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You all take care.
Thank you both.
Bye, everyone. Take care.